We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Chesam and Beis and Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 58b. On the previous Amud, the Gemara said that the government officials, they had Rabbi Binah be by one of the gates and be a judge, and on that gate it said that any judge who's summoned to court, so he shouldn't be a judge because obviously he's accused of wrongdoing. And Rabbi Binah said that's not really appropriate because then anyone can just come along, umazmin ladina, and he's able to just summon this judge to court, pasle, and he'll disqualify him. So you can't really say it that way. Ela rather, kol dayan demiskri ladin umafkin mine memona bedin. What it really should say is any judge who's called to court and they take money away from him, and that money is lawfully taken from him, he loses the case, lav shmei dayan. That person shouldn't be a judge because you see that he did something wrong in terms of this particular judgment that was issued against him. And so the Gemara says, kasvuachi, so therefore they wrote it as follows. They added a little addendum to what was written over there, and it said, Baram sabe de Yodoi Amri. However, the elders of the Jews, they say as follows, you should add as follows, Kol dayan demiskri ladin, any judge who's called to judgment, umafkin minei memona bedin, and money is taken from him in the judgment, lav shmei dayan, that person should not be considered a judge. And the Gemara continues, Chaza dechsiv berosh kol mosa anodam. He also saw that it was written, a different thing was written over there. It said, at the head of all death, I am blood, meaning blood is associated with death. And berosh kol chayin anoch amor, and at the head of all life, I am wine, meaning that wine is associated with life. And so he said to that, according to that, the nafal meigro, let's say somebody falls from a roof, v'mis and he dies, or the nafal midikla, let's say he falls from a palm tree, umis and he dies, demok katli, would you say there that the blood killed him? V'su, and furthermore, mandadarche lemeimas, mashkol echamre, somebody who is going to die, you give him wine, v'chay, and then he'll be able to live. Is that true? Elahachi boy lemechtav, rather what it should be written is as follows, berosh kol marin, that at the head of all illness, not death, but it should be illness, anodam, I am blood is involved in terms of the illness, and Barosh Kol Asvan in terms of the head of all healings, Anoch Amor, I am wine, and so therefore they took that into account, and Kasvu Hachi, they wrote as follows, they had an addendum, they wrote, Baram Sabe Diudoi Amri, however, the elders of the Jews, they say, Barosh Kol Marin Anodam, at the head of all illness, I am blood, Barosh Kol Asvan, Anoch Amor, at the head of all healing, I am wine. Ba'asar the less chamor tamon mitbo samon, and in a place where there is no wine, so there they're going to need herbs. And the Gemara continues, this is a different statement entirely. Kosova pischa de Kaputskia. The Gemara says that it's written by the entryway of Kaputskia, Anpek Anbag Antol. It says Anpek Anbag Antol. These are all measurements. It's the same measurement, different words for the same measurement. Ve'ezu Antol, what is Antol? Zehu Revius Shal Torah. That refers to the Revius, the quarter of a lug of the Torah, meaning that we use in so many different shiurim. And the Rashbam explains, Bereish kol marin anodam, at the head of all illness is blood, kol tachalui ha'adam al hadamhem shemisrabe olav. When people become ill, it's generally because of the blood that increases upon him. And Bereish kol asvan anochamor, and at the head of all healing is wine, shem yishte yain kalocha. If a person drinks a proper amount of wine, v'karoi properly lo yovu lidecholi, he's not going to get sick. And tamon mispan samamonim, you're going to need herbs in places where they don't have the wine. Sham mevakshin samamonim l'refuah, they're going to have to use samamonim, these herbs for healing. Shabamakom she'ein lo yayin means to say, if it's a place without wine, mitsuyin tachalu, and then people are going to be sick, and you're going to need these medicines. And then the Gemara said, Kasav apischa de Kaputskia, it says at the entryway, the gate of Kaputskia, milsa ban beinavshi. This is just a statement on its own. It's not connected to before exactly. V'agav groranas, but since we're talking here about what was written by the gate by Rabbi Binah, so we bring a different thing that is written by the entrance of Kaputskia. V'lilmod b'nei ha'ir misham kasvu shashlosha shemos halol mido achat. And the point over there is to say that all of these names are all the same measurement. It's all just different words for the same measurement. And the difference is, let's say for buying and selling, you need to know what the amounts are exactly. And the Gemara and the Rashbam here continues, Ve'ezu antel Gemara kamarli. Now the Gemara is saying, what is the antel? Kolomar ve'ezu shiuro shel antel. What's the measurement of the antel? Revius shel Torah. It's the quarter of a lug of the Torah. Revius halug dahainu beitzu mechza. A quarter of a lug is an egg and a half. Umishum de'arba kosa shel pesach shirin berevius. Now because of the fact that the dalet kosos on Pesach, the amount has to be a revius. So matzul and chacham smach min hatorah dalet kosos ha'amur b'mitzrayim, and the idea of dalet kosos is learned from the Torah. That's the idea of revius shel Torah. Midalu l'shonei geula, we learn it from the four languages of redemption. Ha'amur b'parsha v'otzeisi v'itzalti v'galti v'lakachti lafikach kari le revius shel Torah. That's why it's called revius shel Torah. V'chein revius shel yayin l'nazir halach l'moshe misinai. And similarly, when it comes to the revius of yayin that applies to the halachas of a nazir, that's also also that's a halacha l'Moshe misinai. Uva Meseches Nazir choshev eser revius hein shemin Torah. In Meseches Nazir they enumerate 10 different reviuses that have to do with it, that come from the Torah. Shiuran b'hach revius, again this measurement. V'hachinam yarminu d'shir antul haynu revius. That's what we're saying over here, that the amount of the antul, that is a revius. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hamarzev ein lo chazaka. The marzev does not establish a chazaka. The marzev is like a small pipe or gutter. V'yesh lemekomo chazaka, but its area, its location, does have a chazaka. The Gemara will explain what this means. Mazchila is like a larger kind of a gutter. Yesh lo chazaka, that does have a chazaka. Sulam hamitzri, the Egyptian ladder, ein lo chazaka, doesn't have a chazaka. V'latsuri, but the Tyrian ladder, yesh lo chazaka, that does have a chazaka. Chalon hamitzris, the Egyptian window, ein lo chazaka, that does not establish a chazaka. V'latzuris yesh la chazaka, and for the Tyrian window there is a chazaka. Ezuhi chalon hamitzros. Now, what is an Egyptian window? Kol she'in rosho shaladam yachol likanis l'soch. It means it's a small window that a person's head cannot fit through it. Rabbi Yehuda says, im yesh la malbein. Let's say this window has a frame. Afal pi she'in rosho shaladam yachol likanis l'soch. Even if it's very small, that the head of a person can't fit through it, harezu chazaka, that does establish a chazaka. And the Rashbam explains, hamarzev tzinor katan, and again it means like a small pipe or gutter, or regil neslosa lesof tzinor gadol. They would attach it at the end of a larger gutter. Haholech al penei kol hagag. This larger gutter was along the entire roof. Or regil lahafcho lechol rosh yirtzu. They would turn it to whatever direction they needed. Umarche kiluach mayim en akosel. It was a way of getting the stream of water away from the wall. And the Rashbam continues, Vilka chen lo chazaka. That's why there's no chazaka. Te'eno davar kavua. The point over here is it's not something that's a permanent fixed item. Vim hechzik bo bal hagag gimel shanim. So let's say the owner of the roof makes a chazaka with it for 3 years. V'tolo so ba'avir chatzer chavero. The chazaka being that it's now going over the airspace of his neighbor's courtyard. Eino yochol liton hechzakti. You can't say, oh, I have a chazaka, I'm allowed to have it here. Tekeven delav milsa dekviyusu. Since it's not a permanent type of thing, lo kapid bal chatzer v'shasek shnasayim v'shalosh. The bal chatzer, the owner of the courtyard, is not so, he doesn't care about it so much, he's not so strict, and so that's why he'll be quiet for 2-3 years. He's not necessarily going to protest, but it does have a chazaka for its location that the Gemara will explain. Now what's a maschila? That's the larger gutter. That's the one that goes along the whole length of the roof. That's something that's fixed. Therefore there's a chazaka. The person's not going to be quiet. Most people are going to be strict about it. They don't want it there if it's not supposed to be there. And so from the fact that the person is silent, you can say that the person who's put it up there, the machzik, probably he got the other person to agree. Maybe he paid him a certain amount of money, and he does have a right to put the mazchila there. Sulam hamitzri, the Egyptian ladder, katan, that was a small ladder. That's why it doesn't establish a chazaka. To cave in the lav milsa de kviyusu, since it's not a permanent thing. Lo kapit, again, people are makbid about it. Lo chashlimchos, he doesn't protest. So therefore, for example, a person puts his ladder in his neighbor's chutzner in order to go up to his roof, or the shov to the dovecotes. Ain't a chazaka. That's not a chazaka. Filatsuri, now a sulam tsuri is a sulam gadol. That's a larger type of ladder. That's why you can establish a chazaka. And finally, chalon hamitzris, the Egyptian window, ketan ein la chazak. It's small. That's why it's no chazaka. Meaning, emasa chalon bekosel beisol lahabed derech shah. Meaning, let's say he put a window in the wall of his house. He's able to look through the window, v'lishmor pardeso v'ginaso, in order to watch over his orchard or his garden. V'hachalon pasuach l'chatzer, and then the window, it opens up into the chatzer chavero of his neighbor, v'hechzik b'shaloshanim, and he has it like that for 3 years. Ain't a chazaka. That doesn't establish a chazaka. To came in the lav milsa dekviyusu lo chashash limcho. Same idea. Since it's not such a permanent thing, he's not so concerned to protest. Avolimaso lo hoyer shelo hoyer lo ora mitzad acher. Now let's say he made it for the light because it's very dark. Let's say on one side of his house, except for here, yesh lo chazaka, so that could be a chazaka. To l'shem kaviyas aso, because then already he made the window in a permanent fashion. Deino yachol l'shtamish beveso below ora. A person can't use his house without light. So if he was putting the window there for that purpose, you can establish a chazaka. V'chol midi de kaviyas have a chazaka. That's the general point of the Mishnah. Anything that's permanent can create a chazaka. V'achi amar Shmuel b'Gemara. That's what Shmuel says in the Gemara. Uliora afilu kol shu have a chazaka. That if it's made for light, even a small amount is going to be a chazaka. And malbein is the frame of the window. Humashkof hachalon milmalu milmata miyamim umismol kein pesach. That's essentially the frame of the window on all sides. And the Gemara explains, what does the Mishnah mean when it says the small gutter doesn't create a chazaka, but the makom, its location, can have a chazaka? Amar Rav Yehuda, Mar Shmuel, Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says hachikamar. This is what the Mishnah means to say. It means the marziv does not have a chazaka from one side, but it does have in its location a chazaka from two sides. Rabbi Chanina says a different explanation. The marziv doesn't have a chazaka. Shim haya aruch mekatzro means, let's say it's long, he can make it shorter. The neighbor can make it shorter. V'yesh l'mekomo chazaka, but the location has a chazaka. Shim bola okro eino okro. He can't just totally remove it. If he wants to remove it, he's not allowed to do that. Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba says, "Hamarzev en lo chazaka shimrotza livnos tachtav bona." The marzev, that small gutter, doesn't create a chazaka, meaning if the neighbor wants to build below it, he could. V'yesh l'mekomo chazaka, but again, the area has a chazaka. Shim bola okro eino okro. If he wants to uproot it, to remove it totally, he's not allowed to remove it. And the Rashbam explains the first explanation, Ein lo chazaka miru achachas. It means there's no chazaka on one side. Meaning, im hamarzev munach barosh duromi shel maschila, for example, let's say the small gutter is on the southern side of the maschila, which is the larger gutter. V'shofech shamayim, that's where the water spills out. V'echzik bo gimel shanim, it's there for 3 years. Ein a chazaka, it's not a chazaka. V'im tzarech bal chotzer l'shtame sham, let's say the neighbor, the person who owns the chotzer wants to use that area over there. Tzarech zel akor marzevo mikan, he's going to have to get his small pipe out of there, l'haniach put it on the other side of the maschila. The reason for this is that the owner of the roof doesn't lose by this. He's just moving it to the other side. He can't say it always has to be over here on this side, I can't move it. And that's why the owner of the chotzer doesn't protest, because he knows the person can move it to the other side. But there is a chazaka for the location, meaning meaning one of the two sides, otzvoni or dromiv, let's say the north or the south, meaning let's say he removes it from one side, he puts it on the other side. The point is that the neighbor, the person who owns the chotzer, can't totally remove it from the chotzer. He does have the right to put it within the chotzer. Meaning, in one of the two sides, it is permanent. It's going to be on one of those two sides. He can establish a chazaka in that sense. He's not allowed to establish a chazaka and say, I always want it to be, let's say, on the north side, but he could establish a chazaka where it can be either on the north or the south, depending on what the neighbor wants. The point is, because a house in general, it needs to have this marzev, this small gutter. When he set up this marzev, at the outset, the idea is it's always going to be there. It's just maybe it'll be moved around a little. That's okay. If he didn't protest within 3 years, if the neighbor didn't protest, so then he loses out. Again, the person does establish at least that kind of a chazaka. Then the Gemara gave another explanation. What it means is a chazaka in terms of shimhaya aruch. Let's say it's long, yoser michtei tzarcho. Let's say it's longer than it needs to be. So for that, he doesn't have a chazaka. V'tofes bi'aver chatzer harbe. Let's say it's taking up a lot of space in the neighbor's courtyard. Mekatzro. So the neighbor's allowed to shorten it. V'hainu ein lo chazaka. That's what it means. There's no chazaka. Lo arko, meaning for the length. Aval yesh lemekomo shumunach sham chazaka. However, it does have a general chazaka for that location. Lo yakrenu mimekomo klal. You can't totally remove it. Afilu mitzad zel tzad acher. Now, according to this second explanation, you can't even move it from one side to the other. Elaboso ruach shehechzik. It has to always be at that side that he made a chazaka. Uvioso makom have a chazaka. In that place, it is a chazaka. And finally, the third explanation the Gemara gave, shimrotza bal hachotzer livnos tachtav. It means, let's say the owner of the chotzer wants to build something beneath this marzev. Bona binyano at shemagil marzev. He can build until he reaches there. V'lo motzi toin bal hagag ki echi da'achziki b'makom hamarzev achziki nami b'masha tachtav. The person who owns the marzev or the roof, he can't say, well, once I have a chazaka where this gutter is, I have a chazaka on all the space beneath it. That's not true. Shem nosein reshus lislos marzevo ba'avir. Just because he has permission to put it in the air, to put this gutter, this pipe in the air, lo nasan lo karka shalo, he doesn't get all the land beneath shatachas hamarzev, which is beneath the gutter. V'lo shibdu lo levilti asos botzra. tzarachav. He wasn't saying that he can't do what he needs to do, meaning the neighbor's not allowed to do anything there. Bein binyan, whether it means building, bein kol davar atzarach lo, anything that he needs to do. Aval imbolo okru l'hagbiya binyana b'makom shaya marzev. Now, however, there is a chazaka for the location in the sense that, let's say the neighbor wants to build something very high where the marzev actually is, eino yachol la'okro, that he can't do. He can't remove the marzev. To l'makomo miya yesh lo chazaka. For the location, he does have a chazaka. Again, that was the third explanation. That was Rav Yirmiyah bar Abba's explanation in terms of what it means that marzev doesn't have a chazaka, but it has a chazaka in the location. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Tes Amud Aleph.